Am I audible? Just let me know in the chat box. Okay, fine. So I think we'll start by congratulating Bhagyalakshmi for winning the prize in poetry competition. Bhagyalakshmi, it's you only, right? Okay, and Chetan, you have submitted, Chetan is there? Chetan, you have submitted the diffraction lab experiment answer in assignment. You have to withdraw. You have to withdraw and put it in the lab. So whenever you are submitting, you have to be very careful. You should see for which one you are submitting. Okay, fine. Another 1 minute and I will start sharing. So just one new thing which I want to tell. It's actually as you're aware, this is a lab integrated course. So theory and lab together is the entire evaluation happens based on both. Okay. So it has been decided that there will be some questions from the lab during the two interns. So there will be like two exams. One will be a midterm exam in somewhere in third week of February, and another will be a computer-based test kind of quiz. So that will be in I think third week of March. So for both of these and even the final exam, you will have some questions, very few questions based on the lab experiments. So just to say that, see, almost like you have done five experiments actually, of which five of them are actually already related to the theory topic which was taught in the class. There wasn't anything different. Okay, so most of them will be correlated. So the question can be something like, suppose you have what did we have? Four probe experiment, right? So four probe theory, you learn it in a theory class, and then the experiment you did it in the lab. So the question there can be like combined questions. Like for a simple example, like what is the formula for resistivity if you have to find for a semiconductor resistivity value? How does resistivity vary with temperature? Explain all those like that. It can be any. The question can be like a mix up. So both theory and lab you will have to attend carefully and study. Okay. Now we are done with 4 units, or in another sense, I can say 2 modules. The first module was semiconductors and devices, and the next was crystallography and lasers. Now we are so that was as per your syllabus. That is module number 3 and module number 4. Now we are moving to module number 1, which is mechanics. Mechanics in the sense both classical and quantum mechanics. Okay. So I am now going to share the screen. Uh, just a second. It's saying I am presenting. Can you let me know if you can see the screen? Just message me. Yes. Okay. Fine. All right. So we are going to understand some basics of classical mechanics. A few concepts which you have already learned, but a few obviously which are new. Okay. So new in the sense we will learn some new form of mathematics. We will bring in some mathematics. So physics always exists with some mathematics. So equations and derivations are not a big deal in physics, right? It's always there, it is always existing. So that is how theoreticians develop the concepts. So now for you to, before we come into the different concepts of classical mechanics, I mean, obviously it's not exactly a repetition of what you learned earlier, it will be slightly different. So before you do all those things, we start with some aspects of scalars and vectors. So you have heard of scalar quantity and vector quantity. Scalar quantity is something which has only magnitude, and vector quantity has both magnitude and direction, right? Now, suppose I consider a region where this scalar quantity exists, okay? A region in space where there is a scalar quantity having a unique value or magnitude, obviously it has a magnitude, at each of the points. So earlier when I studied scalar quantity like distance, no. Give me an example of scalar quantity, guys. Anyone simple example? Distance I can, right? If I don't consider the direction, not on distance, this much kilometer, whichever direction.
Time.
Yes?
Time.
Time, yes, time. Perfect. So time obviously is a scalar quantity. Yeah, mass is also a scalar quantity, right? So all these you just understand as a particular something, some estimation, right? Now suppose I consider that, okay, within a region, it is at each point I have that particular quantity. That means so simplest example, I will take temperature. I have given temperature here. So if I take a temperature in a room, usually we say room temperature 27 degrees Celsius, but that is actually an average estimate. Okay, but if you take a thermometer and start measuring the temperature at each of the points in the room, at each point the value will be different. But obviously, you know that it is just a value, there is a unique value or that there is a magnitude, but there is no direction which is coming into picture. So if I consider in that way, then that region in which, say the room, I have considered the room to see how temperature varies in different regions or different parts of the room, right? So I will call it as a scalar field. So a region in the space in where there is a scalar quantity having a unique value at each point. That is a scalar field. Example, best example, how temperature varies. How temperature varies. Another one is electric potential. If you try to remember how electric potential, how you were studying electric potential, how the potential is being distributed. That is also a scalar quantity. There is no direction coming into picture. Similarly, suppose there is a vector quantity, okay, obviously which has both magnitude and direction at each point in the region. I've taken a region, suppose it was the same room which I considered, and there is a vector quantity, any vector quantity, okay, and it has at each point in that room, it has a particular value and a direction. Then I will call it as a vector field. Simplest example, gravitational field intensity, gravitational field. So with respect to height, obviously you know that the gravitational field varies. That means at each point there is a different value, right? So gravitational field intensity or electric field intensity, magnetic field intensity, all these things are examples for vector field. Now, how do we now start representing these? Okay, before on to that, three new concepts you're going to understand. Whether I have a scalar field or a vector field, there are three new aspects coming into picture. First one is a gradient. So how do I understand a gradient? What I have done is I have taken a ball, okay, there is a ball here, and at this particular point of the center, somewhere in the center, I have taken a point, okay, and you're going to imagine that there is a vector which is perpendicular to this point, okay. There is a vector like this pin, so you're basically like a tennis ball and you have put lots of pins, okay. So this is how it looks exactly like that, right? So I have considered this one point and I have taken, there is a vector which is going perpendicular to the ball at this point, okay. Now this vector at this point is a gradient. Do you understand? What is it actually? At any point of the surface, if there is a vector which is perpendicular to it, then that is a gradient. Simplest, I will go back to this. Temperature, we said the previous slide. Temperature varies within a room from one point to another, right? Temperature is not a fixed quantity, that I have understood. At all the points within the room, the temperature is going to vary, right? So if I measure at one point, I will have a particular value, another point I will have another value. So at one point that gives me something, the other point gives me something. So I can say that with respect to distance, temperature varies. Or mathematically, can I say there is a differential form, something like dt by dx, simplest to understand. When y varies with x, you say there is dy by dx. The same way dt by dx. Temperature variation with respect to distance. That is gradient. So gradient is something it is going to show a particular variation, particular change. Okay, that is gradient. Best example, variation of temperature in a room. Another one, suppose there is airplane, when a flight takes off. Okay, so what is happening at each height? It is feeling different air pressure, right? At each height there is a air pressure. Now, once it is flying, then also with respect to the height, there is a air pressure. When it is landing, what is happening? Height is coming down, and accordingly the air pressure is also varying. So whatever it is reacting to is also different. At each height, it is there is something, the air pressure, I'm better it as air, the air pressure that is going to be different. Okay. Now, moving on to another concept. So this was gradient, where you had something varying with respect to distance or something varying with respect to height. Okay. Now, another, okay, fine. So I have taken the scalar function. So obviously everything exists in 3-dimensional. So all 3 directions, x, y, and z. So I have taken a scalar function phi, which is a function of x, y, and z, all 3 directions. So this letter is known as phi, phi. Okay. Now, how do I represent the gradient? Is this? I will write grad phi is equal to del phi. Now, what is this del? Have you heard of vector del? Del vector? Has anybody heard of it? Delta you have heard of? If I put the triangle the other way, yes, delta you know, right? Now, delta happens actually over a longer distance, longer variation. Del vector, yes, exactly, as I said it correct. It's a smaller variation, it's a small quantity. This is a smaller quantity. Okay, so it is actually given by, suppose this phi was not there. Imagine that phi, I have not written this phi. Okay, then del is I dou by dou x plus j dou by dou x plus k dou by dou z. Now, what is this dou by dou x? What is this thing? Something looking like a letter 2, but I have not written it fully. Dou. It's not d by dx. I have not mentioned d by dx. I am not saying d by dy. It's not d by dz. Dou by dou x means partial differentiation. D by dx, which you usually do, is a total differentiation. Yes, so this is partial differentiation with respect to x. This is partial differentiation with respect to y. This is partial differentiation with respect to z. So how do I understand partial differentiation? So that, let me first see this entire formula. I've taken grad phi is equal to, I put the vector del is a vector, okay, del and then phi, okay. Nancy, please switch off the video. We are having severe trouble with internet. It's equal to I, unit vector I know you know. I think you are aware of, that is magnitude of 1, right? Magnitude of 1. So unit vector I, dou by dou x of this function phi, plus unit vector j, dou by dou y of this function phi, plus unit vector k, dou by dou z of this function phi. So I have the function phi in 3 directions, x, y, and z. Okay. If I had done d phi by dx, that means I am completely differentiating it. When I am doing partial differentiation, that is dou by dou x, I am assuming that y and z are constant. Suppose my function is x squared plus y squared plus z. This phi is, suppose for example, x squared plus y squared plus z. Okay. So when I do the differentiation, I assume, when I do with respect to s, I assume that y and z are constant. Y and z are constant. Now, unit vector I represents a unit vector in the direction of x. Unit vector j in the direction of y. Unit vector k in the direction of z. So that means unit vector I in the direction of x multiplied by partial differentiation of phi in x with respect to x, considering y and z constant. Okay. What is the other term? Unit vector j, which is in y direction. Partial differentiation with respect to y, considering which are the other two, x and z constant. Considering x and z constant. Considering x and z constant. Third way, unit vector k is supposed to be in z direction. Partial differentiation of phi, the function, whichever is the function with respect to z, where I have considered that x and y are constant. So if I say with respect to x, then y and z are constant. With respect to y, x and z are constant. With respect to z, then it is x and y constant. So this is how I will find the gradient of a function. Suppose there is a function given, then I have to differentiate, partially differentiate it with respect to x, y and z, and then multiply it by the different unit vectors, add it up, I get the gradient of the function. Okay. There are a few simple rules. One is gradient. So if I write it like this, I will say it as grad of or gradient of. So gradient of f plus g, two functions, suppose there are two scalar functions f and g, then gradient of f plus g is equal to gradient f plus gradient g. Very simple formula. Okay. Now gradient of f minus g is equal to gradient of f minus gradient of g. Okay. Suppose I do all this entire thing and I get gradient of the function as a 0. It resulted in the value 0. Okay. Then that means the function is a constant. It is constant. Now, what if I take the product of f and g? It becomes slightly different. F into gradient of g plus g into gradient of f. Suppose I multiply the function with a constant. If the constant stays out, then comes the gradient. So all these things, obviously in detail, I think you will learn in maths. I don't know which year, this year or next year. All you need to understand is the concepts of gradient and how do we find it. Suppose I have given you a function phi. What you have to do is differentiate with respect to x, y, and z. Multiply by the vectors I, j, k in 3 directions and add them all together. You will get the gradient. Moving on to the next concept, that is divergence. The moment I say something is diverging, what do you understand? Something is moving away, right? Moving away in a particular direction. So what I considered here is a water pipe. Okay, there is flow of water here, and then there are these two small pipes connected. Okay, so initially I have a particular flow of water. The water is flowing at a particular rate. Now suppose more water comes from this small pipe. What will happen? There will be more amount of flow. Correct? So with respect to the initial situation, the water flow rate has now increased. Water flow rate increased. Now what if with respect to the this initial situation, the amount reduces? Whatever flows out of the pipe reduces. Suppose there is some blockage, something dirt and everything. Okay, so then whatever goes out will be lesser, right? So basically it is like going away. Whatever is going away or whatever is going less, something is being moved out. Something is being moved out in a particular direction. That is divergence. Okay, now, oh yeah, there can be, it can not just that there is some blockage, it can be even leak. Right, all pipes are not that great. There is always leakages. So due to leakage also the water flow rate will be lesser. So how the water flows will be different, right? Ideal situation, it was all supposed to go properly. There is no variation. But if there is more water coming in, then I get more water going out. If there is a leakage, obviously less water comes out of the pipe, right? So like that it varies. So I will take this ideal situation where I get a proper flow of water as no divergence. There is no variation at all. Ideally, whatever was there, it came out. Okay. So there is no divergence, or I will say divergence of the function f is 0. Divergence of f is 0. Now, if more water went off, then it has been more deviated, right? There is more amount of water which has come out, then divergence is greater than 0. You can see this side the arrow is more. Here the arrow was less. The moment I get more water from the other pipes, more water is coming out of this main pipe, right? So this is divergence greater than 0. There is a huge amount of water which has gone out. There is a more addition of water and it is going out. What if the amount is less? What if there was a leakage? So initially I had so many water coming in, but there was some leakage and some of them went off from somewhere else and off. At the end of the pipe, I get only lesser. So I'll say divergence is less than 0. When there is no divergence, obviously divergence is 0. Divergence, just imagine divergence. It's just something moving off in a particular direction. It's just going off in another direction. So suppose you keep a block and pour water, the water will obviously try to spread over and go, right? So that something like that, if you can imagine, that is like a divergence. Now this is divergence. So now again, how do we represent it mathematically? Similar form as earlier, divergence of the function. Now here is the point. When you understood gradient, the function we took it as a scalar function. It was a scalar function. I didn't put the vector notation. Now here the function is a vector. It is a vector. So divergence of f is a dot product of del and f. Dot product of vector del and the vector function f. So del dot f. This is the entire del which I have. I dou by dou x plus j dou by dou x plus k dou by dou z. Dot product of f. Or if I can just bring it all together, this becomes vector I dot dou f by dou x, that is in x direction, plus j dot dou f by dou y plus k dot dou f by dou z. Okay, so this is a dot product. If I take a dot product of two vectors, obviously resultant will be a scalar quantity. Scalar quantity. Now, see, it's written here. Divergence of a vector point function is a scalar quantity. Because I'm doing two dot products, that is between two vectors, resultant is a scalar quantity. I'll get it like some number or something. Okay. Now, so like whether it is 0 is if divergence is equal to 0, that means it is not divergent. If it is a number more than 0, then obviously highly divergent. If it's a number less than 0, then it is less divergent. And a similar rule like earlier, you can apply it for del dot. Say I have two functions, del dot f plus g, del dot f minus g, the products, everything I can do like that. But okay, now we have to be very careful with the products. If I do del dot f, I will get a value, but it's not the same if I do f dot del. It is an operator, so f dot del is not equal to del dot f. It's both two ways, it's not possible. Two ways it is not possible. Now, once again, the same. Earlier we said gradient of a constant is 0. Here also divergence of a constant will be 0. Divergence of a constant will be 0. Now, suppose there is a constant, divergence of a constant into the vector function is equal to a constant into divergence of the vector function. Like similar to how we wrote for gradients. These are just a few properties. Moving on to next, curl. Curling, something is curling. Those who have curled hairs obviously know what is the meaning of curl, right? And best example is this cyclone. It goes in a rotational motion, right? It goes, okay, this is the direction. It goes in a rotational motion. Now, when you pour water into the sink, the kitchen sink, right? How does the water go? It rotates and then it goes out of the sink. It rotates. So, any rotational flow of a vector quantity is called curl. So, curl represents rotational flow of a vector quantity as vector. So, curl is actually, it is going to tell you how much is the amount of rotation. How much amount of rotation is there. If it is a clockwise rotation, then curl is negative. Two important points. If it is a clockwise rotation, curl is negative. If it is a counterclockwise rotation, then curl is positive. Counterclockwise means anti-clockwise, the other direction, then curl will be positive. So this fellow, this is clockwise, so that means curl is negative. if I had rotated in this direction, the opposite direction, like when I churn curd and all those things, suppose I rotate in the opposite direction, then curl is positive. Okay, how do I find a curl if I am given a vector function? Obviously, so divergence and curl apply only for vector function. Gradient is for a scalar function. Okay. Now, suppose I have this vector function f of x, y, z again in three directions. Then curl of f is written as del cross f. So this is now a cross product. So what was del? I do by dou x plus j do by dou y plus k do by dou z. Taking a cross product with respect to f. And you can obviously rewrite in this way: I cross dou f by dou x plus j cross dou f by dou y plus k cross dou f by dou z. Now, obviously, if I have a vector function in the direction of x, y, z, I can the function will be something like this. Suppose f is equal to f1, some number f1 into I. This I is actually unit vector, f2 into unit vector j plus f3 into unit vector k. Then if I have to find the curl, it's very simple. All I need to do is put determinant. What all are in the determinant? I, unit vector j, unit vector k. Okay. Dou by dou x, dou by dou y, dou by dou z. Next, the three constants from this vector, that is f1, f2, f3. You have to find the determinant. You have to solve the determinant. You will get the value of the curl. Okay, you get the value of the curl. Now, suppose I did this curl and I got the resultant as 0. That means the function f is a constant. So something you got as similar everywhere. Suppose there is a constant, then if I do gradient or divergence or curl, resultant will be 0. If there is if I like how I wrote for divergence, if I take curl of c, a constant c into vector function f, then it is c outside, then curl of f. This also was a bit similar in both the cases. So this is like only to know how to estimate, how to find gradient. So when you do gradient, you just do I dou by dou x of the function plus j dou by dou y of the function plus k dou by dou z of the function. You just do the differentiation, multiply by the three unit vectors and add them all together, you get the gradient. Now, for divergence, you are going to take a dot product. You have to take a dot product, you will get the value. But remember, dot product of two vectors will result in a scalar quantity. So you will end up getting a number. For curl, so gradient gives you a vector, divergence gives you a scalar quantity, resultant I am talking about. And curl, when you do the determinant, it will be actually a vector. Suppose everything cancels off and makes it 0, then that means this function f which you considered is a constant. It is a constant. Okay. Fine. Now, moving on with this. So there are a few vector identities which are there. Okay, I don't think this is much required for you when you are learning mechanics. So this, I think we can skip it now. You don't need this. Okay. We'll come to some particular relation later. We'll come to it. Finally, jumping on to classical mechanics. After understanding all of these concepts of divergence, gradient, divergence, and curl. Okay. This is very simple. I'm going to find a relation between the work done and the energy produced. What I have done, I've taken one ball or apple or something, or tomato. This looks like a tomato, I guess. I have thrown it up, right? So when I am throwing it up, gravitational force is in the opposite direction. So it's a negative work which the gravitational force does. Gets converted into potential energy of the ball. Ball gains from the gravitational energy, or the gravitational force is transferred as potential energy of the ball, and then it obviously comes down because there is a gravitational force acting in the other direction, so that whatever was the potential energy gets converted into gravitational energy, right? So here also another one, there is a fixed wall or something, then there is a spring, then there is a mass, and pushing it, obviously this fellow comes back. So there is always a conversion of one particular form of energy into another, right? I converted here, it was gravitational force which got converted into potential energy. But to remember, the gravitational force was in negative direction when I was doing this. So whatever direction in which the work is happening, the potential energy gained is in the opposite direction. And potential energy initially at rest 0 for this tomato fellow. When it was in my hand, it was 0. But when I'm throwing it up, gravitational energy, I'm acting it against a gravitational force. So gravitational force is negative. But this fellow's potential energy, as height increases, potential energy is increasing, right? So change in potential energy is negative of work done. Very important point. Change in potential energy is negative of work done, or delta U is equal to minus W. Delta U is equal to minus W. Now, what if I have, so in this particular case, I have done, there was initially a negative work done by the gravitational force, and the other side it was a positive work done. What if the work done in both directions are same? There is a minus gravitational force and there is a plus gravitational force. What if these two were similar, equal distance, everything? So if it was similar, then I will call it as a conservative force. If it is similar. If in both the directions the work done is similar, then it is conservative force. Suppose, let me put it in this way, I have done a work on the object W1, okay, and work done for the other direction is W2. If both of these are opposite and equal in magnitude, W1 is equal to minus W2, like this case of your tomato thrown up. There was a negative gravitational force and positive gravitational force. Both are in opposite directions, but of the same magnitude, right? So if I have something like that, then I will call that force as a conservative force. That is a conservative force. Simplest example, gravitational force and the spring force. The spring force you are seeing here, it was pushing in, same amount it was pushing out. It was pushing out the mass. The spring was pushing out the mass. So same amount of force, but only thing is it is happening in the opposite directions. That is conservative force. Now what if the amount is not equal? It's not the same amount of force in both the directions. Then you will call it as a non-conservative force. Simplest example, friction. So I take a block and it is sliding. I have taken a, say, elongated plane. There is a block sliding. Initially the work done is less, it just goes down, right? But if I have to bring the same block up on that elongated plane, what I have to do? I have to put extra force, right? I have to put extra force, then only I can take the block up. So that means the work done is not the same in both the directions. The forces are not the same in both the directions. I had to do extra work. I had to apply more force in the other direction. Then only the block could come up. Okay. So that is a non-conservative force. Conservative forces, non-conservative forces. Conservative forces, the work done in direction 1 will be equal and opposite to the work done in the other direction. If the work done in both the directions are not equal, magnitude is not equal, then it is a non-conservative force. Now, I can represent it another way. From point A to point B, I have to do some work to move some object from point A to point B. I can actually take it in this direction, number 1, orange one, or in this purple one. Direction number 1 or direction number 2, both will be same. The force will, any conservative force, if it is, whichever direction I do, it will be same. Okay. Now, what if, say, from point A to point B, I take the object and I return from point B to the same point A. So, total work done will be 0. Let's just think of your tomato throwing experiment. Suppose the force, initial gravitational force applied is something like 1 Newton and, sorry, minus 1 Newton because it is negative direction, so minus 1. Okay, this is a work done. Sorry, work will be force into distance. So minus 1 Newton meter when I was throwing it up, And if it is plus 1 Newton meter while it is coming down, equal and opposite cancels out, total work done, nothing, 0, right? Now, if, so that is the case for conservative forces. Total work done will be 0. Say I take it from point A to point B and in one direction and return from point B to point A in another direction, total work done is 0. A round trip will result in a 0. Obviously, if it rotates, if it repeats in the same direction, if it comes back in the same way also, and if it is the same work which is happening, same way it is going on for a conservative force, then it is again total work done as 0. Okay, so I can represent it by an integral function. Total work done 0. Force into distance is the work. So distance moved is a small distance. I will take it as dr. Instead of dx, I am taking it as dr. And then F is the force applied. So F dot dr. So actually these two are vectors. So it's a vector F dot vector dr. What are the limits from point A to point B? If I find the total work done, that if I integrate it over, I will get it as 0 for a conservative force. It will be 0. Okay. Now I just present it in a simple different way. So work done from taking from point A to B in direction 1, that is this WAB1. Okay. Work done from point B to A in direction 2, that is WBA2. So total work done is 0 equal to 0. I can just move it to the other side. So WAB1 is below negative of my WBA2, right? And or another way I can write in negative of WBA, I can write as WA. Basically the same thing as I told earlier. The path chosen can be anything between the 2 points if the force is conservative. The total work done will be 0 for a conservative force. So what will happen to a non-conservative force? Obviously, total work done will not be 0. The value will be different. So your integration, so previously you had integral A to B work done or integral A to B force vector dot the distance vector is equal to 0. Force into distance, right? If I write it in dot product, then it is force dot distance. That is 0 for conservative force. But for non-conservative force, it will not be 0. So integral A to B F dot dr will not be 0. If it is not 0, that means, what is the thing? There has to be either some loss of energy or some gain of energy. Somewhere that energy has to be somewhere adjusted, right? Energy is always conserved. So in some form or the other, it has to be converted. So either there will be a loss of energy. Say for example, that sliding block, if I'm putting down the block on an inclined plane, and then I try to move it up. So there is obviously friction, and that is why I have to put extra force, extra work comes into picture, right? So there is always some particular loss of energy or gain of energy. So this sliding case which I said is a loss of energy. Where I take the block again up, actually the block is losing some energy. I am applying extra energy, but the block is actually losing some energy due to friction. Okay, so such kind of forces where there is loss of mechanical energy, or you also call it as dissipation of energy. So such kind of forces are called dissipative forces. Dissipative forces. Frictional force is a dissipative force. There is some loss of energy. But there can also be some case in which it can result into gain of energy. Simplest example, you all would have done during some occasion, you all would have bursted crackers. So what is actually happening whenever the cracker is exploding? You know, the bigger one, I don't know what it is called, it goes into the sky and then it produces like a flower, it goes on different directions, right? So actually what is happening there is, that is also obviously a non-conservative force. There is nothing coming back, right? And then actually each of them are getting more energy. Each of those pieces of the firecrackers, each of those burning stuffs, they are actually getting higher energy. They are flying away with large kinetic energy. Okay. So I think we will stop with this for today. Okay. Yeah, it's just I just told in another way. There will be always another form of energy. It will always converted into another form of energy. You also call it as internal energy. Internal energy. Okay. So change, there will be whatever, there will be always a change in the energy. So usually I say sum of kinetic energy plus potential energy, right? Total energy. But in all these cases where we talked, the non-conservative forces, there will be some internal energy. Like due to friction was having some energy, it was creating some energy on that block, because of which I had to forcefully take it up, right? The same way the firecrackers, those have got some extra energy. That is an internal energy. So change in kinetic energy plus change in potential energy plus change in internal energy, overall it will be zero. Why? Because at the end, energy will be consumed. It has to be conserved, right? Energy is never created or destroyed. But what is it going to do? It is going to change the form. If there is a decrease in one form of energy, then the other fellow has to increase. If any of these decreases, any of these components decreases, the other one has to increase. Out of these three, if there is any one decreasing, the other two compensates, and resultant will be zero. Then only energy will be conserved. So I think we will stop with this for today. Give me a second.